It was supposed to be a 10-minute favor, nothing more than tightening a loose pipe beneath an old kitchen sink. But before I even reached for my toolbox, my ex-wife's sister quietly closed the front door behind me, looked at me with tired eyes that carried years of unspoken regret, and said the 7 words that completely changed the direction of my life: stay. I've been waiting for an excuse. In that single moment, every painful memory I had spent years trying to bury came rushing back. The betrayal, the divorce, the lonely nights rebuilding my life from nothing, and the family I thought had erased me forever suddenly stood right in front of me. I had no idea that fixing a leaking sink would uncover secrets that had been hidden for years, or that the person standing across from me had been carrying a burden almost as heavy as my own. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness deserves another chance and that people can heal even after the deepest heartbreak, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us how powerful compassion can truly be. 3 years earlier, I had walked away from my marriage carrying only 2 suitcases, a toolbox, and a broken heart. My marriage to Emily had ended not because we stopped loving each other overnight, but because resentment slowly replaced understanding. Financial struggles, endless arguments, and outside influences had turned our home into a battlefield. Every conversation became another opportunity to blame instead of comfort. By the time the divorce papers were signed, neither of us recognized the people we had become. Her family never hid the fact that they believed I had failed her. To them, I wasn't a hard-working husband trying to survive difficult times. I was simply the man who couldn't give their daughter the perfect life she imagined. They stopped answering my calls, ignored me in public, and erased every photograph that included me as though I had never existed. I threw myself into work because it was easier than facing the silence waiting for me at home. Plumbing had always been more than a job. Every broken pipe had a solution. Every leak could be repaired with patience and the right tools. Unlike relationships, pipes didn't lie. They either held together or they didn't. I slowly built a small business with honest work and long hours. My hands became rougher, but my heart gradually stopped expecting apologies that would never come. I learned to enjoy simple evenings, quiet breakfasts, and the satisfaction of earning every dollar through sweat. Even though loneliness sometimes found its way into my apartment, I convinced myself that peace was better than constant conflict. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I almost didn't recognize. It belonged to Sarah, Emily's younger sister. We had always been polite to each other during my marriage, but after the divorce, we had spoken exactly 0 times. Her voice sounded hesitant as she explained that her kitchen sink had been leaking for days. She had already called 2 plumbers who canceled at the last minute, and someone had suggested she reach out to me. Part of me wanted to refuse immediately. Another part remembered that helping people had never been conditional. I agreed to stop by after finishing my last appointment, convincing myself it would simply be another repair before heading home. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. The same tree-lined streets, the same quiet houses, the same memories sitting behind every corner. Sarah greeted me with a nervous smile that looked far older than the cheerful young woman I remembered. Her home was modest and surprisingly empty. There were no family pictures covering the walls, no decorations trying to impress visitors, only signs of someone who had been surviving rather than living. The leaking sink turned out to be a simple problem. An aging valve had cracked, allowing water to drip slowly into the cabinet below. I knelt on the kitchen floor, replacing the damaged parts while she quietly made coffee neither of us touched. As I packed my tools, expecting to leave without another word, she gently asked me to stay. There was something in her expression that made it impossible to ignore. It wasn't romance or manipulation. It was exhaustion. The kind carried by someone who had held on to painful truths for far too long. She admitted she hadn't called me only because of the sink. She had needed an excuse to see me face to face because there was something she could no longer keep hidden. Over the next hour, the walls she had built around herself slowly crumbled. She confessed that during my marriage, she had seen countless moments when Emily misunderstood my intentions. She had watched relatives encourage arguments instead of reconciliation. Worse still, she admitted that after my business struggled during one difficult year, several family members repeatedly convinced Emily that I lacked ambition and would never become successful. Small lies had been repeated until they became accepted as facts. Sarah had wanted to defend me many times but feared becoming the next target within her own family. That silence had haunted her every day since the divorce. Hearing those words didn't erase my pain. In some ways, it made everything hurt even more. I had spent years blaming myself for losing my marriage while never realizing how many voices had been working against us behind closed doors. Still, anger no longer felt useful. Too much time had passed. We had both lived with consequences that couldn't be undone. Before I left, Sarah handed me an old envelope she had kept hidden in a drawer. Inside were handwritten letters Emily had started writing during the final months of our marriage but never mailed. They weren't perfect apologies. They were confused reflections from someone struggling with pride, fear, and outside pressure. Reading those pages later that night brought tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry in years. Between crossed-out sentences and unfinished paragraphs, I could still recognize the woman I had once loved before bitterness consumed us both. Life became unexpectedly complicated after that visit. Sarah occasionally called whenever something around her house needed repair, but more often we simply shared coffee and honest conversations. There was no rush, no hidden expectations. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She simply understood what it meant to carry regret. We spoke about family, forgiveness, loneliness, and the strange way life sometimes gives people second chances disguised as ordinary moments. Months later, I learned that Sarah had quietly separated herself from relatives who thrived on conflict. She began volunteering at a community center helping elderly residents maintain their homes. Inspired by those conversations, I offered free plumbing repairs once every month for seniors who couldn't afford expensive services. We started working together, traveling from house to house, fixing leaks, replacing broken faucets, and listening to stories from people who had experienced heartbreak far greater than our own. Every repaired home somehow repaired small pieces of us as well. One rainy afternoon, while helping an elderly widow whose basement had flooded, she smiled warmly and told us that broken things often become stronger after they're repaired because someone finally takes the time to understand where the damage began. Those words stayed with me long after we loaded the truck and drove away. I realized she wasn't talking about pipes. She was talking about people. Nearly a year after Sarah first called me, I unexpectedly crossed paths with Emily at a grocery store. Time had changed both of us. There was no bitterness left in her eyes, only quiet sadness. We spoke briefly, awkwardly at first, then more honestly than we ever had during our marriage. She admitted she had spent years regretting how easily she allowed other opinions to become louder than her own heart. I admitted I had hidden my struggles instead of asking for help. We didn't try to rewrite history or pretend the divorce never happened. Some chapters belong exactly where they end. But we left that conversation carrying something far more valuable than reconciliation. We left with forgiveness. As life continued moving forward, the friendship between Sarah and me slowly transformed into something neither of us had expected. It wasn't built on excitement or revenge. It wasn't about replacing the past. It grew from honesty, patience, shared service, and mutual respect. We understood each other's scars because we had both survived the same storm from different sides. Love returned quietly, without dramatic promises or impossible expectations. It simply arrived one ordinary day while repairing another leaking faucet, reminding us that the strongest foundations are built slowly. Years later, our small community knew us not because of our unusual story but because we never stopped helping others. Families struggling financially often found anonymous repairs completed before sunrise. Elderly neighbors discovered broken water heaters mysteriously replaced. Young couples received encouragement instead of judgment whenever life became difficult. We learned that healing becomes complete only when the kindness you've received begins flowing into someone else's life. If this story has touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes hope still exists, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need them today more than ever. Before the story ends, we have one special request. Please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness always finds its way," if you believe forgiveness is stronger than bitterness. Sometimes life doesn't knock on your door wearing the clothes you expect. Sometimes it arrives carrying a worn toolbox, hiding behind a leaking sink, or disguised as a simple favor you almost refused. The greatest miracles are rarely loud. They begin with ordinary choices, quiet courage, and people finally deciding that love is worth more than pride. My ex's sister didn't ask me to stay because she needed a plumber. She asked because both of us had spent far too long living inside rooms flooded with regret. And just like that old kitchen sink, the damage wasn't repaired by replacing everything. It was repaired by finding the broken connection, carefully restoring it, and allowing hope to flow once again. From that day forward, every home I entered reminded me that while pipes can carry water, hearts carry something even more powerful, the ability to forgive, to rebuild, and to prove that even after life's worst leaks, something beautiful can still be saved.